Hello, and welcome to this webinar about starting your own cybersecurity company. We have some really impressive founders joining us today who are going to share some of the lessons they've learned along the way in their own journey and hopefully inspire some of you to get started on your own. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy day to be here with us. I know there are a lot of things competing for your attention, but we feel this is an important conversation and are very glad that you're here. If any questions come up during the conversation, you can add them to the chat window of the specific platform you're watching this from. We'll try and answer any questions as they come in, and we'll address any that we didn't get to at the end of the webinar. I would like to thank our panelists for being here with us today. They're all very busy people, and it's an honor to have them sharing this valuable knowledge with us. My name is Christopher Luft. I'm one of the co-founders at LimaCharlie, and I will be moderating the conversation. To get things started, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us what their company does. Corey, why don't you start, then Roselle, then Maxime.
Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate you having me. Hi, I'm Corey White. I'm CEO and founder of Cyvatar, and we are a subscription-based outsourced cybersecurity company. So previously, you could not actually go and get cybersecurity implemented in your company. Now you can simply subscribe. We will do gap analysis, and it will implement the missing gaps and maintain that in a subscription for a fixed fee.
Very cool. Roselle?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show today. I'm excited to chat with everyone here. So I am the CEO and founder of KeyCaliber. KeyCaliber is a risk-informed asset management product. So with our solution, instead of spending months conducting interviews and questionnaires to understand your environment and what's most important and what the risks are, we, in an automated way, provide a full asset inventory, and for each asset, an impact score, a risk score, the connections, and the security tools that are covering it. So you have this visibility into your own environment and can make informed decisions.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Maxime?
I'm Maxime Lamothe-Brassard, CEO co-founder for LimaCharlie. And what we do is security infrastructure. So it's kind of taking an AWS-like approach in terms of access to the technology. And then the types of products are cybersecurity primitives. So essentially, we do tooling for cybersecurity professionals. It's kind of the exact opposite end of the spectrum from Corey, what you guys do, which is kind of going to make an interesting discussion.
Awesome. Roselle, I'm going to start with you because somebody's got to go first. How did you come to the realization that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was it something that was always there, or was it identifying a given opportunity that drove you to action?
Well, so I caught the entrepreneurial bug very early in my career. And at the time, I was actually working at a startup in San Francisco during the end of the initial .com boom and the bust.
Wow.
And so I was in that environment, which I found very exciting. Although I was at a company that had 6 rounds of layoffs during the bust. I made it through all of them, but still I got to see the full roller coaster. But that's where I started to develop this interest in entrepreneurship. And I actually had my first startup was a web portal for folks who wanted to find workout partners and soccer teams and the like. So nothing related to cybersecurity. But that gave me the bug. And then many years later, once I was in the cybersecurity industry, that bug resurfaced. Because I saw all these problems and all these technology gaps that weren't being filled. And that's what prompted me to switch gears and say, this is a gap that needs to be filled, and I'm going to fill it.
Oh, that's very cool. I love people's Genesis stories. And yeah, I think people who are younger and didn't realize what a big crash that was at 2000, like what a time to be sort of starting out in your career. That's interesting. Corey, did you have a realization early on, or was it something that happened later?
Interesting enough, I've always had the startup bug. I remember when I was in the 90s, I was working full time, but had like a side hustle called Enterprise Internet Consulting, where I was helping build websites and get companies started on the internet. right? And then I realized I'm not a web developer, so I stopped doing that. But I've always been an entrepreneur. I love building things. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. I did this online test called Spark Type, and the Spark Type gives you these 10 kind of characteristics of yourself. And there are two primary. One is I'm a maker. I love building new things, and I'm a maven, and I love learning new things. So that's just always been me. I learn and I build. And working for a regular standard company and a regular job, you can't build and learn fast enough. So I just get bored. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my very first company was making WordPress websites, so I feel like we got something in common. Max?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I didn't really. It wasn't so much the entrepreneurial bug as the N+1 kind of bug. So I think everywhere I was, working in different companies or the government, kind of always looking to go, one step past the edge of where I was. And I think it only kind of crystallized around, okay, well, now the only step that's left is kind of to go and start something, because, there's no other company, that's going to allow me to do this. So, it's just kind of a natural transition to go and start something.
Very cool. So I'll just throw this one out for everybody. And, now that you've kind of gotten to where you're at in your career and you've got these companies and they're growing, if you could go back to those very early days and give yourself a piece of advice, is there one thing you wish you could tell yourself?
So tough. I'm of two minds. One mind is you learn from everything. So everything is an experience. The other thing is I wish I could slap myself around a little bit and just focus. I knew about growth is really hard to do. But you get excited and you're like, oh, let's grow fast. And the people that told me, pace it and take your time. And I had to learn the hard way on some of those things. So you learn from both, right? So
yeah, there's a risk to growing too fast, but there's also the upside if it works, right? So I think right now in the economy, we're seeing that it probably cautious is a better approach at the moment.
Yeah, for me, this is my second cybersecurity startup. And so with this one, it was way easier because I had all the lessons learned from the previous one. And one of the biggest lessons learned was know who you're going to be working with very well before you start working with them. And with my last one, I didn't have that lesson learned. And so now this time around, I have a phenomenal team. And it's all because I learned from the first one. So going into this first one, I told myself, look, get this right this time. And so that's made a world of difference.
Yeah, where were you 3 years ago? I'm kidding.
I felt that one.
So many people who are in entrepreneurship know that feeling, and it's kind of remarkable when I've talked to folks and they're like, oh yes, I had the same experience, or oh, I've heard about that experience.
I feel like it's similar a little bit for me, which is really, I would say really think about the type of company that you want to build and what you want that to look in the future. I think, this is really the first company I started, but I was kind of part of some early companies before. And that's sort of the big lesson I learned from before, which was, if you're starting to build a company because you're passionate about something, that's good, but it's worth kind of looking at the dots where it's going, right? Like if you're building a consulting company, then there's just some characteristics that come along with that, and you got to be in it for those characteristics. And so, versus starting a product, there's a very different set of characteristics, right? That you're going to be working with. And I think early in my career, I just had the passion, And I didn't really think about connecting the dots of where it was going to be. And so I, would end up in a spot where it was good, but I wasn't building kind of towards a company that was thinking it was going to be. But I think ultimately the other, interesting flip to that is I'm glad I didn't know the timing and the effort starting it, right? To what Corey said, pacing yourself, and things take longer than you think, and things end up being harder than you think. And if I had known, with full knowledge before when I started, I think I would have, I might have been discouraged at first. Whereas if you take it day to day and you build it over time, then you're good.
Yeah, I remember when I started that WordPress company, talking to my partner at the time, how are we going to manage the growth? That's a good lesson. For someone out there that's thinking about jumping into the ring, they have this idea, they think it's a good one, and they think they can execute on it. Are there ways that you suggest that they should try and validate it, or is there ways that they can validate it before they go all in?
Have so many conversations with potential customers. Just talk to them all day, every day, because you'll find that your view of the world is not everyone else's view of the world. And you want to change what you build so that it matches a plurality of views. And that's the biggest challenge in the early days, is making sure that you're building something that people value enough to spend money on.
Mm-hmm. And I'd add to that as well, that get customers early on that are actually, it doesn't have to be a lot, but that are willing to pay for the little thing that you're starting to build, because everybody's got opinions. But until somebody's actually willing to put some money down, they're just opinions. They're not things somebody's actually willing to pay for.
Yeah, 100%. For me, I did both, because what I thought this company would be at the very beginning isn't exactly what it is today. But you have to learn to pivot. You listen to what those early customers, that early feedback, and you keep pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. Then eventually you will have something amazing. But even when you think it's amazing, you still keep pivoting, because I'm still pivoting today. And so you have to have that mindset and be fluid in what you're building, because ultimately that's what's going to make you successful. And for me, once I got my first few customers and got close to $1 million in sales, then I realized, okay, this is it. Then I went out to get funding.
Yeah, that's great. I always think of like the divining rods they used to use to find water. There's water out in this direction somewhere, and you keep making the adjustments until you land on it. Yeah. So yeah, talking to customers, making sure somebody pays for it, or is willing to pay for it. Are there other things that founders should be working on in those early days? Is building relationships with VCs or brand and marketing, are those things they should be spending effort on? Is there anything else?
I'd say building the team, just in those core folks that you need in the really early days. So if it's a technology company, either you're doing the initial building or you're hiring someone to do it, and you're going to have to work very closely with them. I find that talking to investors, it's a necessity. It's also a massive time sink. And so in the really early days, it could be interesting to get their feedback as well, because some of them, they are talking to a bunch of CISOs and they have some good insights. So from that perspective, it could be useful. And also you get a feel for whether you like their personalities and want to work with them when you are at the point of raising. But I think in the really early days, it's all about team and product, and that has to come first.
Yeah, I would say, as it relates to investors, make sure when you listen to them, they may tell you to build what they want you to build, what they think that they can invest in, which will help them, but it may not necessarily be what you want. Maybe you want to build something that every VC wants to invest in, and that's your goal, or maybe you want to build something that you actually are passionate about. I think you got to know the difference between those two, because an investor will lead you down a certain path that may not be what you want. The other thing that I think I did a pretty decent job of is I had a really large advisory board. I had a lot of people around me, either the advisors or a CXO council, advising me on what's right and what's wrong and just guiding me to getting to the right solution. And those are things you don't have to pay anybody for. You can offer them stock or whatever, and then they will come in and just advise.
Right.
I would piggyback on that when you get advice or you get feedback from customers or from VCs, you could get sent off in 12 different directions, depending on the conversations.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to weight the feedback and figure out right, who really has their finger on the pulse with it. Or sometimes it's a melding together of feedback from a couple different places. But I've found it's been super interesting in my conversations because I'll talk to two equally amazing cybersecurity individuals who will have completely opposing views on the same topic.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a big challenge to figure out, all right, do I listen to this one or that one? Do I somehow sort of fuse the two, or do I just call it a wash and then continue other conversations?
And I'd keep going on that topic and say, like, I think for me, it's been very valuable to speak with a lot of potential investors, of VCs, to get that breadth is one kind of side to really kind of see the whole spectrum of how people think. But I think the two kind of other advantages, one is it gets you used to talking about what you do at a high level and to figure out what resonates with people, because you know the business super, super well, but others don't. And so getting used to learning, oh, when I talk about what I do in this certain way, nobody cares. But when I talk about this, there's a lot more interest. And I think the last one is I found that a lot of VCs have really interesting advisor network. And speaking with those advisors also allows you to spread the word about what you're doing and find the ones that do hook onto what you're saying and that align with you. And those people that align with what you're doing have been super helpful for us in just, helping us reach more people.
Yeah, one last cap to that, because it was a passionate topic. I know we keep coming back to it, but if I listened to what the VCs and even some of the VC advisors, I would not have solved the customer problem, because what the customer actually wanted isn't what a VC will probably invest in. Okay, so I had to solve the customer problem and then find VCs that are really investing in solving the problem. So it's crazy, but I want the audience to think about it from both sides.
Yeah, well, because sometimes you run into VCs who have a view of the world that they've formulated based on something, and they're pretty set in that view of the world. Mm-hmm. And so if you come in with something that doesn't fit that view of the world, they're going to still look at it from that lens.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's why you got to definitely weigh what you want to retain when you get feedback and what you don't.
Oh, for sure. Getting I was going to say a thick skin, but that's not the right mentality, but learning to accept somebody else's vision of the world that you fundamentally might disagree with, and just, take it as is and try to extract some value from that without, just having tunnel vision is very good.
Yeah, because you could learn from, even when someone has a completely opposing view. I mean, we spoke with one person who had been in the role of a security leader, who felt machine learning can't be 100% accurate, and our product relies heavily on machine learning, and I wasn't going to dispute that. I'm not going to say it's 100% accurate. I said you're right, but we're replacing a task that had been done by humans before. Mm-hmm. Would you consider humans to be 100%? Yeah. And he said yes. And so at that point, yeah. Okay. I knew where he stood on the topic, and it was just a very fundamentally different view.
Yeah.
But it's still an interesting conversation because it really brought to the fore the fact that, yes, everyone here values technology and advancements and thinks that can solve many problems, but that's not everyone's view.
Growing the team and hiring beyond that initial core of people on the founding team can be difficult and introduces a lot of risk to companies at the early stages. Any advice you would give to people who are facing this daunting task for the first time, bringing on those first true employees that are sort of disconnected from the founding team a little bit?
So, like I said, this is a lesson learned from my last one. And so this time around, all my core folks have been either people that I've known for years or came very highly recommended by someone I've known for years. So I've been very fortunate that my whole leadership team, no one came in off the street where they were an unknown variable. I already knew them, or they had been very heavily vouched for.
Yeah, I'd say the network effect is the best thing people can do early on, but eventually you just kind of run out of network. So
yeah, once you run out of network, you really have a few things I do, and I don't get it right either. Believe me, I wish I was some magic formula, but I do definitely try to know the person and know them through a network and do some kind of references. But there are a few things I ask. I actually, when I'm interviewing, I don't care about whatever I'm hiring them for. Hopefully, whoever my team member, whatever that subject matter expert, they've done that part. By the time they get to me, I want to know who this person actually is, right? And so a few things I always ask: why are you crazy enough to try to join a startup? Okay. And I just want to know what their opinions are. Why would they want to join this? Because there's no guarantees. There's a lot of risk. You don't know what's going to happen, right? So I want to understand where their head's at. Other things that if they're open to it, we do. I share my personality profiles with them, and then ask them if they were willing to share theirs or take it. And we talk about it just to get to know each other, and they'll know what I'm good at, some of my faults, and I love to hear kind of what their thing is, because my approach to hiring and building an organization is pretty simple. I want people doing what they would do if it wasn't work, right? I love being a founder. I love being a startup person. So it's not really work. I work my ass off, but it's not really work. So I want people doing the exact same thing, because if they have to force it, it will show, especially in a startup.
Yeah, and it's often a lot more work than a regular job. So finding people who are passionate, I think, is pretty important.
Yeah, I think those are great answers. If I was to add something, I think a thing I've always liked to filter pretty heavily on is people that will have a different opinion, but that are able to discuss the opinion and kind of do things in a very constructive way to go in a direction. Because early on in a startup, there's 50 different directions that you could go. And so having people that really understand, what they're doing and can analyze the situation is really good. And people that can also recognize sort of the longer goal, and then to have those discussions across the team to then align in the right direction. People that are, very, very categorical, has been in my past it's been tricky sometimes because, doing a startup is trying to optimize for 150 different variables. Nothing is going to be perfect in all dimensions, right?
Yeah. So a couple of my thoughts. If it's a key position, I like to do a try before you buy kind of situation where the first 3 months will just be on a contract basis. So both sides get to see if it's a good fit and get to see how well everyone works together before there's any major commitment. And then in terms of some of the questions that I ask, I always like to ask, what do you do when you don't know something? Because especially in a startup, there are going to be times where you're running into something that's completely new. And I want to understand how people react to that. I mean, first, their reaction to that question in general could be very telling. If they're like, what do you mean I don't know something? But yeah, exactly. But more often it's just because I want to get an understanding of, okay, are they gonna just be flexible and figure out a way to solve for X and get it done? Because that's a skill that's really critical when you have an early stage startup.
I love that point. Just a quick point, real quick. When I started, and totally dating myself, the internet had just come out. So me as a kid, like, you didn't have Google, right? So if somebody says, well, I don't know how I figure that out, and you're like, you can look it up. It's just you can figure anything out. If they can't figure something out, that is a non-starter for me. They just got to walk through the process. Well, I'll look it up, I'll try it, and it's steps now. The world is all available to you now.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's no excuse. If you don't know something, you can know it in 10 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, that was a good question. Thank you. So given there's thousands and thousands of security vendors, and that's not an exaggeration at all, there's literally thousands. How do you go about trying to differentiate yourself and stand out from the noise as a young startup that maybe doesn't have, $1 million a month advertising budget?
I can go on this subject for a long time. But
I'll be brief then, because I want to hear the answer to my opinion on it is, for me, and the thing about a startup, the startup has to be angled around you, your personality. If you are a founder, then the whole concept of blending in, shouldn't be something you're doing, right? Because you have to differentiate yourself, and it has to be around what you're passionate about. So for me, I'm a bit of a hippie. So you'll see, like, in our marketing, you'll see stuff like Peace, Love, Cyvatar. When you, like, at South by Southwest, I spoke on love versus fear. We need a cybersecurity revolution. So those types of titles and those are specifically designed to stand out from the rest of the technical, hey, hear about your MDR solution from us at Cyber. No, that's like ridiculous. Why? That's what everybody's talking about. So we don't use those same terms. And so we've intentionally looked out to make a brand that is differentiated. And then on top of that, also have purpose behind it to really, really change the world and make our customers more secure. So be a purpose-driven organization. So that's how we're differentiating, but I'd love to hear more ways to do it.
No, I like that concept a lot. I mean, so first off, the fact that the market is so crowded, that's an issue, because that it does a disservice to everybody, and particularly the buyers, because there's just so much noise that it's hard for them to decipher what's legit from what's not. I feel that a good portion of that is just because of all the investor dollars that have gone into cybersecurity. So you end up having the normal process of natural selection doesn't happen in this industry the way that it should, because there are so many investors that just want to have a cybersecurity portfolio company. And so companies that would have normally fallen by the wayside still get propped up, and then the market gets more and more crowded. And so for us, the way that we look at it is, you have a finite number of product categories, and granted, these product categories sort of shift over time and they grow, and Gartner has a new acronym for a new product category every quarter. But the way we look at it is, as an early startup, you can't create a new product category. even if your technology is that unique where really there should be a product category for it. And so it becomes a challenge to figure out, okay, what other category do I fit in, but I'm a plus to, and I have this unique twist and this unique capability that no one else within the product category has. And so that's how we look at it. Right now, we talk about asset management, and asset management in of itself is, yeah, you've got your inventory and maybe a little bit of info about it, but we're adding this whole risk component to it, which is a completely different take on it, because you're not just saying, well, here's everything, but now you can focus on what's the highest priority because it's greatest impact or greatest risk. So we look at it from the standpoint of try to fit in but still stand out, which is a challenge. It's a big challenge when you're a very early stage startup and you can't shout as loudly as the other companies that are out there. I mean, even if you're on the RSA floor, the Black Hat floor, you've got this tiny little booth compared to all these massive booths. And so the differentiation needs to be more subtle. It can't just be, look, we've got the biggest budget to spend on marketing.
That's so interesting. Real quick, I just want to chime into that because I'm taking the opposite approach, not saying one is right or wrong, but a few things that I think are different. I think it'd be good for our audience to hear. What has changed is social media, because there's usually not as much of a charge for social media. You don't have to spend as much. And especially during the pandemic, you can still kind of reach people because they're in front of their computers. The other piece to it is I battled with that exact thing. Should I be a plus one to everything else, or should I create a new category? And I could not get away from creating a new category. Okay, I knew that required getting the word out more, and that's why our approach is the way it's been. But ultimately, that's what we needed for our business, was to create a new category. What it gave me also was the power to say that I think everybody else, for lack of, sorry, anybody else listening, but everybody else is doing it wrong. If I go out and say I'm MDR or XDR or whatever else, we're the opposite of that. We actually will solve the root cause of the problem so you don't get alerts. So it's just a different mindset. I think both work, but that's how we've approached the crowded market.
Yeah, no, kudos to you for making that happen. I mean, I've seen with many companies that when they want to try to create their own product category when it's really early, there's just so much time and money and effort that goes into educating the market that they just can't sustain it when they're really, really small. But I mean, if you pulled it off, that good on you.
That's I feel like we're a little bit kind of closer to what Corey's saying. I always think back around the the saying that it's better to to find a few people that really love what you do than to get a lot of people that are just like, yeah, it's all right. And so I think what we've tried to do is to kind of define sort of the sandbox of what we're playing in, right? And then to say that within this, we have a very strong vision within that sandbox. So I don't have a very strong vision around like threat intelligence, because that is not part of where we're going. However, if we're talking about security infrastructure and transparency in the security posture, then we do have a really strong vision in that space. And so I think finding that sandbox, defining that vision that not everybody's going to adhere to that vision, but finding that a lot of people strongly do. I think that's what really helped us get a lot of people spreading the word for us without us having to put, a one-to-one like dollar of marketing to like dollar of outcome kind of thing. But it's to Roselle's point, it's very difficult, and finding the balance especially if you're talking with, some customers are super Gartner sensitive, and that makes those discussions really difficult, but it's part of the challenge.
Yeah, and definitely no magic formula. I think this is probably the hardest part of trying to bringing something to market. You can have the best technology in the world, the best team, but getting it out there through all the noise is definitely, I think, the biggest challenge in a lot of this. So we had a couple come in from the chat. I'll just put them out there. The first one is, what do you look for in a VC partner? I think that's a great question, especially for somebody going through this process for the first time. There's a lot to learn.
I'll start. I'll be quick.
Thanks,
because
Corey.
I hadn't figured it out yet. What I would like to see is you want somebody that's on the same page as you, and sees the same vision, but also can be objective and still redirect you and point you in the right direction when you may be going astray. I think it's hard because the founder and sometimes the VC partner, they have different goals, but you have to align with that ahead of time, because if you don't want to exit in 3 to 5 years, then you need to ask, well, okay, how long can you invest for? You have to ask that and better understand that, because some of you are like, hey, all right, 3 to 5 years, we need to pay back our LPs. That may be a thing, or it may not. So you really got to get to know their motives of investing in you and what they want out of the business. And you really have to be upfront with that VC partner and say, oh, this is a 8 to 10 year run or something. Then, okay, it may not match. I'm just throwing out scenarios, but those are things you have to really think about. And it is like speed dating. I think, probably everybody on this call, like both of my rounds, I went through 40 to 50 different conversations before you find the right one. And that's just the way it works.
I totally agree. And I think it links back to a bunch of the discussions we've been having in terms of, we're talking now in terms of, hey, how do you define what you do? Do you fit in a specific, Gartner kind of term or not? And finding investors that will kind of understand your approach and that are, that align with it. They're good with taking that direction. How you get, to that end goal will vary. And I think there's a lot of input, from investors and advisors. But I totally agree with Corey's point, making sure that fundamentally, you're aligned to go to the same place, and not feeling, I would add, not feeling bad about meeting people that aren't in that space, right? It's totally fine from both perspectives. It's just important, I think, to filter fairly early on like, hey, you're a great VC, but we're not going to the same spot. Let's chat again in 5 years, and who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I would basically bucket VCs into 3 categories. You have the ones that are neutral, where they're going to provide funding and that's about it. You have the ones that are a negative because they come in, they've got their view of the world, they're trying to impose it, and they just muck up everything. And then you have the ones that are a real value add, that they're coming in and they're bringing their expertise, they're bringing their network, they're trying to help out in any way that they can. And so it's really a matter of trying to figure out which bucket of the 3 that they're going to fall in. And sometimes the neutral ones are completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously you want to have as many of the value add, the positive ones as possible, but neutral's fine too. It's just being able to distinguish the ones that are going to be a net negative. And sometimes you can tell that in the personalities right away, and you can tell that in just the language they're using of how they want to be involved with their portfolio companies. And sometimes it's tough to tell because they could be saying, oh yeah, we want to be really involved and we have this network and this and that. And so you have to sort of distinguish, well, does being involved mean that they're going to be just overbearing and causing more problems than they fix, or are they really going to be helping with moving the company forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all great. All resonate with me. Sorry, Corey.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one last piece. I would make sure that you interview, do background checks on your VCs. Like ask them, hey, do you have references? Can I talk to some of your portfolio companies? Obviously, they're gonna give you the good ones that like them, but at the same time, do your background research because it may be telling. That may be what tells you the difference between whether that's what category 1, 2, 3. And I love that, Roselle. Which category they actually are. And the other part about it, which just being true to the audience here, sometimes you just got to take the money. I hate to say that because at the end of the day, you talk to 50 of them, one offer you money, like, okay, we just got to roll. And so that does happen, which sucks, but yeah.
Yeah, survival's the last stop. The other one we had come in is, should someone look to work in the industry for a given amount of time before venturing out on their own? If so, what's the best environment? Large corporate teams, MSSPs, startups? Anybody have an opinion on that?
Well, I spent about a decade on the operational side of cybersecurity before becoming an entrepreneur. So yeah, I thought that was valuable. That was immensely valuable because I had felt all the pain points and I had seen where there were problems that weren't getting fixed. And I would talk to my peers and say, hey, do you have a solution for this? And they said, no, it would be really helpful if we had one. So I found that having that industry expertise before starting my first startup was utterly crucial. I don't think I would have had the same insights if I was coming in from a different industry. Now, with that said, I'm sure that there are tangential industries where you can apply much of the same learnings to the industry. But in general, I think getting an understanding of what it feels like to be in the shoes of the customer that you're selling to makes a world of difference.
And I would add to that, there's the industry. I think the other dimension is also very useful to have been in different size companies or organizations in that industry. Because, if you go and work for an IBM, the concerns that you have in the day-to-day, working maybe as an individual contributor are going to be vastly different than if you're in a small startup. So I think kind of having done the whole spectrum, it gives you a good feel for how different people feel. And having been in the smaller side of things, I think has a side benefit of helping you get an appreciation for, the beginning of what it's going to be to do a startup, right? To start a company, because you don't have all of that support. So being used to, talking to, to people about various topics about, maybe marketing, even if you're in a really small company, it gives you a little bit that taste for the types of things you're going to have to worry about.
Yeah, I'll give both answers again. Yeah, my answer is always both, I guess. But I think when you're a first-time founder and you haven't watched it happen before, you will fall on your face, and then you just gotta learn quickly and keep on learning because it's just stuff you won't know. So I think that's one side of it. But for me, I am a first-time founder, but at the same time, I had a front row seat as an executive of building a unicorn, right? And so I was in all the board meetings for 6.5 years and watched a company go up to unicorn status. And I got to build from zero all the way up my own P&L. So I don't really consider it necessarily your normal first time because I came into this knowing a lot of things. You're still going to learn some new stuff, but I would just encourage anybody that's new that wants to get into that. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset, go and do it. Just know that you're going to learn a lot. It's a mindset. And if you've had a front row seat, I really recommend doing it after a front row seat, because it does get a little bit easier. You don't have everything solved, but it does get a little bit easier.
Those are great answers. And I would just even add to that too, that took me a while to figure out, is that don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're trying to start a company and you really admire somebody who's working in the same space or done something that you admire, most of the time people, if they receive a genuine ask from somebody, I'm always happy to help. And I think most of you guys would agree with that.
100%.
Absolutely.
Cool. No, this was a really great conversation, and I think fully useful information for anybody thinking about starting a cybersecurity company. I want to thank everybody here. Really appreciate your time. And before we go, I just want to put it out there for anybody thinking about taking the plunge that LimaCharlie offers a $1,000 infrastructure grant to help entrepreneurs get started. The grant's applicable to all the computing resources that LimaCharlie offers, and we'd love to help you get going. You can just send an email to answers@limacharlie.io, and we'll point you to the right stuff. So thank you again so much for your time today, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lots of fun.
Bye.